I will now call the December 12th, 2023 City Council meeting to order at 6:01. Want to remind all counselors and anybody else speaking to make sure that your microphone is on. I think that and our cell phones are on silent mode. And make sure that you speak into the microphone. We all have a tendency to lean back and get relaxed, and then that makes it very difficult on the recording. So we're ready to move into the Pledge of Allegiance. Counselor Fox, would you lead the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, please? Sammy, would you do roll call, please?
Yes, we have Mayor Bell,
Here.
Counselor Engelbretson,
Here.
Counselor Fox,
Here.
Counselor Lyman,
Here.
Counselor Smith,
Here.
Counselor Wells,
Here.
and we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Mayor's comments are next on the agenda. I don't have many comments on this wonderful December evening. I can't believe really it's December already. We're pretty doggone close to Christmas. But I would like to point out that Christmas in Coburg this year was an absolute rousing success. I think I heard you say, Counselor Wells, that the food trucks sold out of food. That is fantastic. And I'd really like to put on the record and thank the folks on Main Street, the Grange for the wonderful chili feed and for hosting Mr. and Mrs. Santa, Public Works staff for getting up all of the decorations, the banners, making sure all the lights worked, and countless volunteers. I mean, I know Main Street had a lot of volunteers, and Counselor Smith says to that certainly.
There was 15, and then people showed up from the community that said, I always say, oh, what can I do? So
Wow.
it was great.
Because there was wreath making and or decorating and manning booths. I know that the Market Bazaar, all of the booths were sold out. There was a waiting list at first, and then our Main Street chairman was able to accommodate those on the waiting list by, I think, opening up Coburg Commons and having vendors in there. So kudos to all of the work that was done. There was also a food drive to benefit our local pantry and folks in need. And I think that too was a great success. Fill those barrels and hopefully fill the shelves. And there's a lot of people that use that facility. Holiday party. You have a red folder item, and I'm sure you all received this also, but the holiday staff appreciation celebration. So please join us for that. That's going to be this Thursday evening, 4:30 to 7, and I'm looking forward to a different venue and a different way of doing things, and really getting together with all of our friends in a very social atmosphere. I will say we had a meeting with Pioneer Valley Estates folks last Tuesday, and I was absolutely blown away by the attendance. It was a great first meeting, sort of opened up dialogue. Hopefully will open up more conversations and improve trust between that community and this community. While the residents of Pioneer Valley Estates are not in city limits, they still consider themselves part of this community. We will do well to sort of bear that in mind, and there will be a full report on that later on in session tonight. I do also want to note, and again, in your red folder, that Counselor Blaine has officially resigned effective November 28th. And so the charter requires that the council to declare that vacancy and by majority vote of the council. So I will entertain a motion at this point. Questions? Yes, Counselor Smith, no? You just want to vote.
I will, motion for a change. I move to declare city council position 5 vacant and to move forward with the recruitment to fill the vacancy.
That was a motion by Counselor Smith and a second by Counselor Fox. Any discussion? The only thing I would say is, any of you know, friends, neighbors that are interested in being more active within, looking at that council position, the applications for that will be available in January. Is that, they're available now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So all those in favor? Raise your hands.
Aye.
That's 5-4. Any opposed? None? Motion passes 5-0. Counselor Lehman, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so question, he was on the planning liaison.
Yes, that, we'll get into that. Yeah, you are just ahead of me, as usual. Counselor Blaine was also serving as council president. So that we will need to elect a new counselor to serve as the president until January of 2025. So is there anyone, I have had conversation with a current counselor who has expressed interest. And is there anyone who would like to make a motion? Mr. Wells.
Make a motion to appoint Kathy Engelbretson as the council president.
I second.
Is there a
Wasn't
second?
that bad.
I did it really fast.
There's a motion by Counselor Wells and a second by Counselor Lehman to elect Counselor Engelbretson to serve as council president. Is there any discussion? Counselor Engelbretson, are you willing to do that before we vote?
I'm willing, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, we have 5 in favor, any opposed? No. Hearing none, seeing none, the motion passes to Counselor Engelbretson become council president until 2025. Thank you very much for doing that.
My pleasure.
And as you pointed out, oh, yes.
I just said my pleasure.
Thank you. And as you pointed out, Counselor Lehman, that we will also have a planning commission liaison opening. I think we will wait to fill that until we have another person on council. Because everybody on here has at least one assignment, so I think that's probably the fair thing to do, but thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, agenda review. Sammy, are there any proposed changes to tonight's agenda?
We do not have any changes, Mayor. Other thing that I'd like to note is there is a staff report to go, just an update with the Pioneer Estates House up
Yes.
pack.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you. That is a really good summary. I glanced through it and absolutely concur, but I know you'll fill us in.
Right.
Everything else too. on that. Citizen testimony, anyone signed up?
We do not have anybody signed up tonight.
probably snuggled in their warm homes. Enjoying the evening. So the consent agenda, counselors may remove any item from the consent agenda for discussion by requesting such action prior to consideration. We do have a finance audit committee member appointment. You'll see in your packets that the application for Jeff Milam has applied for that position. Jeff has served on the budget committee for a number of years and has a background in state finance. So you can certainly take a look at his application if you have not. And this will be really great because the Finance Audit Committee has had a vacancy on that committee for several years, I think since 21, perhaps, yes, since July of 2021. So we have Jeff, Finance Audit Committee did review and approved his application, thinks he would be a good fit for that committee. But I will need your approval or direction to appoint him to that. And then we have the minutes of November 14th, 2023 City Council. So if there are any issues that need to be pulled, please say so now. No? This could be a short meeting. Huh? So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda this time. Fox, did you have a question?
Yeah, is the Finance Audit Committee appointment separate from the consent agenda or part of the consent?
I believe it is part of the consent agenda.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Counselor Engelbrechtson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Fox. All those in favor, please raise your hands. 5 in favor. Any opposed? No, there better not be since. So we have 5 in favor and 0 opposed, and the motion passes. Any special guests? No special guests. Ordinances and resolutions, there are none. So council action items, transportation safety ad hoc appointment. And we'll have a staff report from Mr. Hanks.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I'll do a brief summary of this one. This is, as you're all aware, we created or Council created a ad hoc committee to deal with a set of transportation safety items. They're listed in the Council staff report here. That's not the exhaustive limited list, but that's the focus area for this committee. City Recorder had put out for people to sign up and be considered for the appointments to the ad hoc committee, and we got a great response. You can see in the attachments, I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 respondents. In discussing this with Mayor Bell, we talked about how to maximize and not say no to anyone, with that great response. So what we've put together is, looking at really the focus tonight is the citizen membership of 4 citizen members of the 7 overall. The mayor is 1 member. There is an appointed city council member that you all voted on last month, which is Councilor Lehman. And then another appointment directly from the Planning Commission, which is John Marshall, was the Planning Commission appointment. So in addition to making the appointments tonight for the 4 citizen members, We had two additional, of those complete list of citizen member applications. One is a planning commissioner and one is a city councilor. So a concept that Mayor Bell and I came up with is to maximize involvement is to have those two function as alternates. Councilor Wells is an alternate from council and Commissioner Jim Bell as an alternate to the planning commission. I think alternate could be taken, fairly loosely. They will get all packets, can attend all meetings. It isn't limited to only if the other person isn't there. I think, but from a voting perspective, and all of these are obviously recommendations for things, they're not decision-making. Council makes the decisions. I think they're alternate kind of in name only, but that gives us full participation. That was at least a concept that Mayor and I thought might be productive since we had such a great response.
It's worked well having alternates as on our liaisons. And I know Councilor Engelbretson and Councilor Fox have done a great job of trading off to make sure that the Lane Act position is covered. Because, let's be honest, things come up and we're not always here and we can't always participate in everything we want to. So that has worked well. Councilor Lehman.
Well, just a clarification, when I was on the finance audit committee, I was in a non-voting position. I think because it was a liaison position, is the transportation and safety ad hoc committee voting position for the council.
A voting, it is an advisory committee, but certainly the recommendations could be vote on those. Good question.
So
Councilor Fox.
if two are on the alternate and we need 4 community members, are 2 to be winnowed out?
Yes. So what my decision was, as mayor, in looking at this, was to take first, just to be completely objective, to just take dates of application as the selection point. All other things being equal. So that would put Brian Hamburger, Brandon Rhodes, Gene Shopper, did I pronounce that correctly? Mackenzie Bryant as the 4 members on that committee, the 4 voting members. Now, obviously, the other 2 applicants, should they wish to come periodically, could certainly come, but they would not be voting members.
Unless they were sitting in place of a counselor that was.
We're not really doing, well, these are not counselors.
Well, no. But they are part of the committee along with the counselor.
No, we're looking at page 15.
Right.
Okay, so there, you can see that there are more community members. So the last 2 community members, and I'm probably not saying this exactly correctly, so Michael McDonald and Vilma McDonald would not be officially on the committee.
Okay, so
I think-
restate it a different way. If I was absent and Alan Wells was
Yes.
giving me
As
voting.
an alternate, yes, yes, thank you for working through that. Right, not
On the committee, but in my
But you
absence.
would-
you know my role.
exactly, and you would get the packets and be prepared just in case. That makes sense? Okay, good. Yes,
Can we have 5 instead of 4? Is there any set rule that we can only have 4 members? Vilma and Michael, I'm the one who recruited them, and I was like, come on, participate in this, and they finally said, okay, we will, and they didn't realize there was a time.
it was competitive.
Well, yeah, I didn't know that either.
Right?
Should have probably said that, but I mean, it's not a big deal, but are we limited to 4 people?
Yeah, the resolution does specify, so we'd have to change the resolution.
They certainly are very welcome and encouraged to come or to give other actual members of that committee, you maybe, their recommendations.
And we do, we'll have a spot on agendas for, as a public meeting for, for input from, from the public as well, as we do in these kind of meetings.
I think this is a great idea. Just like there's an alternate for councilman, we have an alternate for a citizen because we want to have citizen input. And if we only have two show up, if you have two alternates that show up, they could step in. That was an idea.
Could probably make something like that happen. I think with keeping them on the email distribution list for packets, and then we'll just say we can have a statement to say if any citizen members are not able to attend, it'd be kind of on their, four of them to relay and confirm. I think that probably would be a workaround to not have to change the resolution and still accomplish, I think, what the intentions are. And again, the packets will be posted on the city website as well, so it isn't
It
isn't limited.
A secret meeting.
Yep, yeah. No, I think that could work, and we can word our communications in a way to, I think, incorporate that idea.
I hate to turn anybody away. I mean, this was fantastic to have this level of interest in the.
I only hope the city council position has that level.
That's right. So get out there and recruit.
Now, they didn't return my emails when I asked them about. We're silent.
This was only a 6-month commitment, right? It's the beauty of an ad hoc. Yeah.
6 month and it's, has very fixed items that we will be addressing. Counselor Smith, did you have something to?
Well, with Counselor Lehman's suggestion, I like the idea that it also would keep the vote balanced between citizens and elected officials and staff. There wouldn't be any one group that would, if something important came up, it wouldn't default to elected officials and staff. Citizens would have equal input with the liaison.
Just a quick note, staff doesn't vote ever,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So, yeah, this staff facilitates and presents, but it would not be voting.
But elected officials would. Yeah, so, yeah, that is a good balance and a good reminder. Okay, so is there a motion to accept this as amended? We can't amend the resolution, but we can just,
So the suggested motion, we could add, any fifth. So after the blank slots for the 4 names, I think you could, insert in the inclusion of at least one of the two. I don't know, which of the McDonald's would be the extra. You could do it that way to have and include variable alternate. Yeah, it probably would be best, as Sammy said, probably to add it to the very end, because the first 4 are the ones that are consistent with the resolution. So yeah, add whatever your language that you might come up with to the very end.
anybody brave enough to make that, motion? All right, you're brave, thank you.
I
Counselor Wells?
move to recommend Mayor Bell appoint 1, Brian Hamburger, 2, Brandon Rhodes, 3, Gene Shopper, 4, Mackenzie Bryant, as well as Alan Wells as an alternative city councilor and James Bell as an alternative planning commissioner to the Transportation Safety Ad Hoc Committee. And in addition, Michael and Vilma McDonald as alternate citizens at large to the Transportation Safety Ad Hoc Committee.
I will second that.
Well done. That was a motion by
Very
Counselor
well
Wells
done,
and a
yes.
second by Counselor
Done so well, I'll
Fox.
second.
And that is to appoint Brian Hamburger, Brandon Rhodes, Dean Shopper, and Mackenzie Bryant, as well as Alan Wells as an alternate city councilor, and James Bell as an alternate planning commissioner to the Transportation Ad Hoc, Safety Ad Hoc Committee, with the inclusion as community member alternates Michael McDonald and Vilma McDonald. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hands. 5 in favor, any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries 5-0. Now we have the Water Fund Capital Project Expenditure for Coburg Water and Hydraulic Modeling. That sounds very exciting, and Mr. Hanks will be giving us that staff report.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just looking at the title. Okay. That was an impressive title. This is this item in front of you is something that we discussed a little bit at the November work session on the 28th as part of kind of that full water system update. And the intention with this modeling is to kind of take a really brief pause now that we have more information about the water supply from the well number 3. And we would like some analysis done with the adjusted population and growth forecasts that we know are quite a bit different than what the data that was in the original water master plan. The combination of those plus that there was no change in our storage capacity that was anticipated as a project. The combination of all of that, there's value in having this modeling contract run scenarios to see really what our priorities should be in the next 5 to 8 years on water infrastructure. Is supply, did we address supply adequately? Is supply still a very high priority? Is making the east side loop for the capacity and distribution of the system a higher priority than pursuing additional supply? Is storage a big issue, or with our updated population growth forecasts, is that adequate? All of those questions, or many of those questions, we think we can narrow down and hone in on with this modeling work being done by Consor under contract management through Branch. So we won't be bidding the contract. It's a subcontract that Branch will help us manage and supply data for. But that is really, in a nutshell, what this is intended to do. The key is really looking at the scenarios with those change data points from the original water master plan that was approved in 2016. But as we talked about in our work session, a lot of the data that drove that, some of it was 2010 census, some of it was 2013, 14, 15 data. So it's aged data. And this is well short of a water master plan update, but it may help us also decide where the value is in potentially, or where to slot a water master plan update, how far out we would want to be before we consider that. One little piece that also goes along, I think, really nicely with this is Brian has been working with Branch on the completion of the water conservation and management plan, the update to that plan. It's a requirement of ours. That will be done somewhat in parallel with this. So by spring of 24, we should have, if council concurs with conducting this modeling analysis, we should have the combination of the water conservation and management plan and this modeling, and an updated CIP and an updated financial picture of our $4.5 million in loans and financing that are funding these projects. All of that should culminate in mid to late spring, where we can make some much better decisions about the order, how fast we need to do projects and what order they should be in, and what are the priorities.
Mr. Lyman.
Maybe 6 months ago, we had a report from a consultant discussing about possibility of a third reservoir, and then also what the improvements, maintenance, repairs, painting, etc., to the existing two reservoirs. One of the recommendations was to lower the capacity or the actual, usage of the tanks, I think 10 to 15% to alleviate some stressors.
Mhm.
Question is, have we implemented that? Are we still gonna implement that? Cause that's kind of part and parcel with the modeling and projections, what our needs are.
Yeah, I'll have Brian come up and say, I'll have him verify if my statements are right. I don't believe we've implemented that on the existing, two tanks. We have been pretty, aggressive in looking for grant funding to do that, seismic rehab project, which would allow the capacity to stay the same or even potentially inch up a little bit if it's seismically, retrofitted. There's the natural hazard mitigation plan, as you recall from a month or two ago, that was approved by council. That specifically gives us the opportunity, that project was included in that, mitigation plan. So it gives us the ability to, look for grant funding for that. So emergency management and hazard mitigation is one area where financing opportunities are actually grants, not necessarily just low interest loans. So definitely still on the table, and really part of this modeling, you're right, is to look at how much of a priority is that? And really some of our timing, we need to do one or the other at some point relatively soon, either seismically rehab it or probably implement that suggestion of lowering that. And so we can run scenarios, look at what lowering that does to our system capacity. So definitely a part of it. And you mentioned the reservoir number 3, clearly is in a phase 3 when we talked about at the work session, partly because of the priorities, the level of priority, but partly because of the price tag. It's a significant price tag that we don't have any existing funding for. But is still a something that's out there that this model I think would help us determine whether or not that slots ahead of or behind additional supply.
What's the depth, variety of availability of seismic grants out there?
There are, timing is a challenge and competitiveness is a challenge. The window that we're lined up for that Burke is working on with us, with the county, actually, we have to fold into the county's grant applications. They feel strongly that ours is a good one for the region. That will come, the window I think is September. So they start doing that we would be doing application in June, July-ish, and have the final stuff submitted to the county in September. So then they submit to, I believe FEMA in October, I believe. So part of it is just the cycle. We can't just submit at any time. It comes on a cycle, and they are competitive, and we have to get through we have to win at the county level to be in that grouping that the county then submits, because we don't independently get to submit just for this one grant, but there are other grant opportunities that we're looking for. Those are likely mostly loan with some grant. They aren't pure grant, most of the other ones, but the resiliency hazard mitigation one is a pure grant. You want to, did I mess up, or is there any more to add?
Nope, said it perfectly.
Was it it was Conser that gave us the update to the water plan?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's correct. Formerly Murray Smith. So if you're looking at older documents, Murray Smith, Consor, they're the same company.
Okay.
It just changed names in the middle of all this.
Good.
So to answer your question about reducing the level in the reservoirs, we haven't done that. We're doing that for a specific reason, like Adam said, to add to it. What we want to do is we want to get through that third production well coming online and into the system before we even think about reducing that level, just to give us that extra capacity in case there was an issue. I'm actually wanting to increase the reservoir levels to give us that added buffer just in case, but we haven't done that either. Obviously, keeping it where it's at right now is fine. It's just we want to get that third well online before we think about reducing the capacity.
I'm a little confused with that answer because you're going to wait till the third well comes on. It goes into that reservoir. So does it matter whether the reservoir level that's maintained at a higher level comes from wells 1 and 2 or 3? It's still water volume.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. But before we, reduce the capacity, we want to make sure that, water supply, is adequate. So if we did have a problem in well 2 and well 3, we're not missing that extra space in the reservoir. So if overnight something happened to the well, we have that third well, to supply water. If that makes sense. We just don't want to reduce capacity in the reservoir and then have something happen to a well where we can't recharge it to the level that we need. It's a great question though.
Did we go in and actually do the physical inspection? Interior of the tank yet?
I believe Consor did, cursory, they took, the last time we were in there was in either 18 or 19, for the inspection. So 2018 or 2019 is when the last time they were inspected.
That
They
was-
are due for another, cleaning and inspection.
That was what other recommendations in addition to the
Yep,
other?
that's correct.
How do you have to drain the reservoir? You
Uh-uh.
put in a scuba diver?
Yeah,
or
they do
something?
diving. Yep.
It had to be one or the other.
Yep.
Or somebody that could hold.
It's a
breath
scuba
for
diver
long
with a
time.
very large vacuum
Yeah, okay.
and a good camera.
But as I recall, the inside, the interior as well as the exterior of those reservoirs was actually in pretty good shape.
Yeah,
for-
there-
they were
there
built
was
in the
a-
70s, right?
Yeah. There was some, spot rusting, in certain spots, but nothing that, would alarm anybody. Especially the inspector that, did the diving and Consor when they reviewed the inspection reports.
Good news.
Yep.
Anything else? Anybody else? Questions? All right. Mr. Hanks, anything else from you?
No, maybe just to summarize that, the motion in front of council is to, since there isn't a contract that will be coming forward here, the scope of work is in the materials, but it's really just there probably isn't technically a reason to have council make a motion, but I think because we already have appropriations in the water fund to do this type of work, professional services, but it is a new add to kind of the plan. So I think it was, that's why we decided to be sure to bring it forward. We talked about it at the work session. So really the motion is just approving utilization of already appropriated funds. It's not a budget adjustment, and it's not a contract authorization. So it's kind of a little bit out of the norm, but clearly one that we wanted to ensure we were all on the same page on.
So it would be an expenditure of up to $25,000, is that correct?
Right, yeah, the Consor contract is depending upon how, the hours exactly work out, it's between 18 and 20,000, and then there's some additional dollars that would be spent from branch invoicing for data that feeds the modeling and for assisting with some kind of project management oversight. So it isn't an exact, it'll be based on hours and we'll be managing the combination and keeping it as tight as we can, but somewhere between 18 and 25. My guess is it'll be right around 22,000 or so when we're said and done, somewhere right in the middle there.
This time I will entertain a motion to go ahead with that expenditure.
Move to approve utilization of up to $25,000 of budgeted water fund appropriations to conduct water system hydraulic modeling consistent with the attached scope of work.
I have a motion by Counselor Lehman. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Counselor Fox. And Counselor Smith. Right, any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hands. 5 in favor. Any opposed? 0 opposed. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. These water projects are really keeping us on our toes, aren't they? And now we have the wastewater facilities plan sole source procurement. Yes, the sole source procurement. And we have a staff report from Mr. Hanks.
Yeah, we'll switch gears to the wastewater side of things. This one is in advance of a contract or expenditures that would come to you. And this really is relates exclusively to the council's kind of dual role or other hat as the local contract review board. So this is a procurement specific request and conversation and approval. In the budget for this fiscal year is a wastewater facility plan, appropriations of 65,000 for that. And in advance, prior to kind of engaging on, moving forward with that plan, this is a request to have council consider whether or not the vendor that we've used in the past could be considered and meets the criteria in our public contracting ordinance to meet the standards and requirements to a sole source solicitation method, meaning that it would be a direct contract with a vendor rather than an RFP and soliciting bids and reviewing, scoring and selecting. And the materials in the staff report in bold, the bold are the staff responses to the questions basically that are posed in the public contracting ordinance that give kind of the guidance or the bar that council must concur with to say that this is acceptable and appropriate as a sole source procurement. So if council, concurs with that, then we would be in a position to negotiate with the vendor and really the summary of the argument or defense of the sole source procurement method is that Kennedy Jenks, that contractor is the contractor that did the wastewater master plan, the overall full master plan, and has all of the details of our system, our plant, has been in contact with our staff over time and is really uniquely positioned to be able to deliver us this facilities plan efficiently, economically, and with the highest level probably of expertise. Not that others couldn't do it. They would have a ramping up of understanding our system, understanding the data, obtaining, getting all the data into their files and models and all of that. So there is value and efficiency to a sole source procurement, we feel, with Kennedy Jenks. But that isn't staff's decision. That is council's decision to determine whether or not you concur with that assessment.
But this is in keeping with our ordinance.
Right. This is a
As well as
requirement. This is a
ORS.
requirement of both our ordinance and the ORS. If you were not going to do competitive bidding for professional services over the contract amount, this contract amount would trigger normally without council approving sole source, would trigger an RFP process, which we, listed as an alternative that if council doesn't concur, or doesn't feel that that's appropriate, the alternative then is to work likely with branch engineering to develop an RFP, put it out for bid, review bidders, hope that we get multiple bidders. It's a very niche, that's another kind of piece of this. It's a niche service and not a whole lot of engineering firms bidding on work. And we're in this interesting spot of being relatively small contract, especially this project, for the large firms that are in the bigger markets. So we're probably looking at firms that are, more in our region, which again, I think leads us to kind of, the assessment that, Kennedy Jenks is, available and, familiar and, ready to go.
Questions?
Adam answered mine.
Counselor Lehman?
Yeah, have a little problem with it, but I also understand your rationale for it. We've not done this in the last 5 years in any other contracting service that we put out for RFP. And I understand what you're saying here is very limited in the number of people, although we probably would get a number of bidders, but not necessarily lower bidders. But it's also a time sensitive issue. It may take more time to get somebody on board. I'm just a little qualm about the competitive process that we followed, that being followed in this case. I'd like to hear a little bit more if we could about rationale for stepping aside from our ordinance to do this.
Well, hopefully, the objective is we're not stepping aside from the ordinance, we're utilizing the ordinance to allow this pathway. And really the criteria, these 6 items, the meat of them are really 3, 4, and 5. Is the rationale, and you're right, it is, there's time and dollars involved in developing an RFP and selecting a bidder. Council choosing to go that route rather than a sole source is perfectly fine decision from the staff side. We're just saying we think that there is, it's smart and efficient and legally available to us to go that route. We don't have to go that route. I don't want to feel like it's a pressuring, and it would take some cost just to get to the bidding review process, and then we're gauging whether or not that gets us anything different, or improved from the sole source path. That's not a for sure either way. I'm not saying that Kennedy Jenks, in a competitive process would obviously, for sure win out and be the most cost competitive, or be the only bidder, or that, all things are possible. But we feel that it fits this code option, and it is, I have used it in the past very selectively in prior places, and it is typically on very involved. It actually, I think it was only wastewater. I don't think I've ever done it even on the water side. In my past stuff, it was, again, very similar. It was wastewater specific because of every wastewater plant has very intricate design issues and details. And it is somewhat common to have carry forward studies and assessments done by the same engineering firm that did the original. Not required. So I appreciate that concern. I think it's a healthy concern that we wouldn't want to deviate without good justification.
Mr. Wells?
We've appropriated $65,000, but that's not their bid to do the work, right?
Correct. We haven't got to that spot. Right. Yeah, that is
still negotiate, even if they give us the bid for X dollars, we can say, oh, that's too high. We want you to fine tune that a little bit.
right. Well, if we come to a spot where, their bid in a direct, negotiation ends up being higher than 65 to do the work, we would be coming forward to you with a contract and saying, here's a contract and it's X dollars. Do we want to move forward, or do we want to actually go out to bid? You still could go out to bid.
We can go back to bid if we feel that it's outrageous.
Right. The challenge, of course, is when you budget for something, you're looking, you can, just like the modeling conversation for the water system that we just completed, you can adjust scopes of work to meet your dollars, or you can adjust your dollars to meet your desired services. So we can do both as we get into that conversation. And then we also, we'll have to look at timing of the vendor. If we then go out to bid, that we may or may not lose any slots with the vendors, and that's always, we never know that part of the equation.
Mr. Harmon, did you want to add something before we get
Yes, I've spoken with Kennedy Jenks over the last couple of years and gearing up for some sort of facilities plan update. And when we talked price prior, it was $40,000. So setting it at 65 added a little bit of buffer in there in case things came up, right? So it's just that 35-40 was just an estimate, but things may come up where they have to spend a lot more time on data. Like Adam was saying, if we go to the bid process, our engineer would have to put together the RFP. That's going to cost us money. If we go with someone other than Kennedy Jenks, there is going to be a lot of time involved in getting them data, either through digital files or hard copy files. So going this route is the cleanest and gets us the most accurate data at the end of a facilities plan because they already know the system. And we're not retraining the engineer on what we have. Yes, sir.
Counselor Fox.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have, not totally unique, but a fairly unique system in the step system where we went from plan A to plan B where it became the step system.
That's
And
correct.
that's even more alarm boxes and stuff.
That's correct. And the two primary engineers, the engineer that designed the treatment plant and the engineer that designed the collection system, would be working on this facilities plan. They are both still with Kennedy Jenks.
Counselor Wells.
I don't want to beat this too much, but I mean, Brian, if we let the contractor know that we no longer have a competitive bid process in place and that we've allocated $65,000 for this, pretty good chance it might come in at $65,000.
Would this
I mean, do we need to do anything right now? I mean, can we not address it at this point until we get their bid?
Well, most often, anybody that's bidding on a project knows the estimate cost of a project. Because we have to give them the engineer's estimate. So,
But we're giving them, we're
So
playing our cards.
yeah, I totally understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but
we're not approving the total amount. If I'm reading this motion correctly, what we're moving to approve or disapprove is the sole source exemption from competitive bidding.
Right, yeah, so the
wastewater facilities.
allocation, you know, and to answer maybe that strategy question in general, that gets asked of us all the time in every department, everything we do is what's your budget for it? And that's the public sector thing where we don't have the ability to have a closed book, negotiating system. But it is a budgeted amount for capital and those are budget numbers. Those aren't actuals. And so what we look at when we then negotiate is, you know, what are the rates for the various engineers that be working on the project? What are their estimated hours to do their various functions? A small example of the Consor one that we just looked at for that scope of work, I think that was the third scope of work that we went through with them, adding some things, subtracting some things, and then they redo their pricing based on, you know, what level of their engineering staff applies. So we have an actual, I mean, as Brian said, in most all cases, we have an estimate that we use in our conversations with people. What we end up with that's in front of council for authorization to expend in a contract to let has the services matched up with the dollars. And then we say, is that a good contract or not?
So that will come back to us at a
Correct.
future date when
Right.
they actually have put forth the proposal and we have a hard amount in there. Counselor Lyman.
And I think most contractors realize that when we have a budgeted amount, we have a 10 or 15% contingency within that for things that are unforeseen, not necessarily. That's what we expect the actual bid or budget to be for the scope of work as presented, but a contingency that's added to it. I hope that they would see that and say that our target budget's not necessarily 65,000, but that's including the contingency.
And that does include, you know, potentially when we budget for things, that's the all-in cost of doing this particular capital item. That isn't necessarily all of who we would contract Kennedy Jenks for. Branch engineering may have a component so the total project cost is 65,000. That's not necessarily Kennedy Jenks's target look, you know. We may have 10 or 15 that,
Who else did you
No,
have?
as long as Kennedy Jenks understands that if we feel that their bid is ridiculous, we can always go back to the bid system. I think that keep them honest.
and we'll evaluate the scope of work and the, you know, the cost, the bid contract amount, same as we would when we're looking at, you know, with others to compare it against. We're looking at it with one vendor, but we're still, you know, looking at that very hard and making sure that the rates they're charging and the hours, mostly the hours that they're spending per task make sense. That's really the function that our professional staff, that Brian, his team and Branch will be helping us with is fine tuning that, you know, the hours and the scope of what's entailed.
I've been very impressed, I will say this right now, with what our city administrator and our public works department has done in really sort of taking a second look about how do we use our external vendors, not having them sort of really fine tuning, if you will, what they do. So we're doing all that we can do before we bring in those external vendors, because those meters run fast when you're talking about external vendor pricing. So, thank you for putting that all together. So at this point, if there are no other questions, I will accept a motion, entertain a motion.
I move to approve a sole source exemption from competitive bidding for the planned wastewater facilities plan contract, and concur that the request complies with the exemption requirements set forth in ordinance A-91-C, section 7 of the City of Coburg Rules of Public Contracting.
Motion by Counselor Lehman. Do I have a second? Second by Counselor Wells. There's a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Wells to approve the sole source exemption from competitive bidding for the planned wastewater facilities plan contract, and concur that the request complies with the exemption requirements set forth in ordinance A-91-C, section 7, the City of Coburg Rules for Public Contracting. Is there any further discussion? No? Then, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? 5 in favor and 0 opposed. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Great discussion. And good questions. Keep us thinking about all those alternatives and options. Now we're going to move on to the wetlands credits. Wetland credits for the water line extension and service connection. And again, will be Mr. Hanks, I believe.
Yes, I'll start as usual. And as usual, Brian, instead of making his way halfway up, should probably make his way all the way up, because it's always on these items, there's always a tag team approach to it. So Brian will fill in where needed. This item is a request to authorize, this is actually a contract. So we're finally to a spot where we've been talking about contracts. This one is a contract authorization to purchase wetland credits that assist us and enable us to get the environmental permits that we've been working quite a long time on and quite hard on for extending water service to Premier RV and for the eventual extension of water service to the 107 acres of annexed land that is immediately east of Premier RV. There's a, you know, a long history. This was hot and heavy on my day one and continues to be ever since. And we're making progress, and the kind of I guess unfortunate, it does occur that wetland delineations happen, and you find that the public improvements projects disturb or impact these wetland areas. As I understand it, it was delineated after, there were some timing issues, but it was delineated after. We have a very small, a 0.184 acre of land that is, that was disturbed by the service road and the bore pit, and then will continue to be disturbed by some of the water line installations. And that triggers either two things. You either mitigate, which you then restore. You can restore on site what you've disturbed. You have a 5-year, you have a maintenance plan, you have a reporting plan, and you have a 5-year period where you have to prove that that has worked and established and get inspected and approved. Or you can buy credits, and the credits mean that an equal amount have been, of wetlands have been protected or maintained, restored in another area in lieu of doing that work. The time that has elapsed since the original disturbance kind of barricades us from doing the mitigation, on-site mitigation component ourselves, and pushes us to the credit purchase route. However, even if we had been able to do on-site mitigation, it is likely that the cost associated with that would be equal-ish to the credit purchase. So I don't think we ended up with a fork in the road that created a much more expensive route. In fact, we may have a more similar cost, but a more efficient route, because we don't have to worry about 5 years of monitoring and updating and keeping track of a very small wetland on the east side of the freeway. So the sample contract is included in this contract, or in this staff report, and we don't have the exact dollar amounts. There, as we dip our toes into this world of wetland credit banks, you learn a little bit, and we're still learning. It is right now they're in demand. They're hot, and they've been rising since we've determined that we needed this exact amount through our permit process. So the reason it's here in front of you now, before we even have have the exact need to pull the trigger, we do need to pull the trigger probably in January at the latest. We wanted to get it in the very next council meeting after we found out we needed to address this, because the credits that we originally thought we had kind of verbally reserved were sold. We didn't put firm, we couldn't yet put firm commitment down on them, and they're gone. And the replacement credits that we found are more expensive. So we of course don't want them to keep creeping. We'd like to lock in as soon as we can that price and get those purchased. So that is the request in front of council tonight. And again, we have a range. We don't have a specific dollar amount. The range of total credit cost is between $32,000 and $35,000. And again, that enables us two things. The permitting covers both the water line connection to Premier RV and the eventual extension of the line 300 plus or minus feet from the bore pit to the annex property. Anything I missed?
Nope, you hit it all. You hit it all.
And we did not know this was a wetland when we started this process. It had not been called a wetland at that point.
Yeah, when and how, I don't know. So when we did the bore, it wasn't called out to us then. I think that it was when the process started for, the 110 acre, piece, the annexed piece, when they started that process. And we were kind of working in conjunction, not with them, but simultaneously to, get permits, is when the area that we were going to be working in was, called out as a wetland area.
It was really kind of a product of their delineation efforts that showed, because that delineation wasn't done prior, it wasn't required to be done originally. So it didn't have any characteristics, necessarily obvious characteristics. So a delineation early on for a very small project wasn't done. But as associated with that project, it did, and it creeps just right out into that little area.
I remember it came to, our awareness when we had to go onto their property to access their infrastructure with our new infrastructure, that we then came into a wetland situation.
Yes and no. It's your statement and what Adam and I were just saying are very closely aligned to the same thing. They don't have any infrastructure yet, but in planning for the infrastructure and the development, that's how this came about. Now, in the beginning, the wetlands area was expanded, around the bore pit, because I think it was DSL, Department of State Lands. The person that was doing the delineation for part of it changed, and then the new person, and I don't know names, they noticed that the piece of the bore pit was actually a wetland as well. So that's how that got expanded, from not just the access road, but to the bore pit.
I'm in favor of this because this is the key link piece to get it all completed. Just to clarify, we're basically purchasing some wetlands that exist someplace else that will go into a wetland program. Offset the fact that we don't have the wetland replace our wetland
Right.
going out of the system.
Yep, that's how those credit systems, like same thing, well, similar with, it's a market-based way to ensure that in aggregate, wetlands are protected, just not on site.
Carbon offset or
Recs,
any other
recs and other
things
yeah.
that we talk about now that it's taken me a while to kind of wrap my head around, but.
And Adam's, spot on. Mitigation probably would have cost about the same as the credits, but it's the backside. It's the monitoring for 5 years. And, just in what I've learned, to add on to what Adam was saying, what I've learned about wetlands is, it's very fragile, and, you could have to start all over again very quickly. And, one thing to add to this, it's not our property. Right? So we're working in easements. So then we would have to go to the property owner and say, just so you know, now this is a wetland. So, sorry, but we don't want to do that, right? That's not what we want to do.
Yeah,
we
so we
wanna
feel this,
offset just
Yes.
Our small.
Yes,
piece.
this is the best way to go.
So our infrastructure will not be in wetland after this occurs. It's still will be.
It will be in a wetland bank. Is that the easiest way to say that?
yeah, I think it still is, it's still located in the delineated area. There's no changing that. What
Right.
the permit does in our credit purchase is say we've
Alternate.
offsite mitigated for that, the impacts that have happened to that onsite, that have damaged that wetland that's on site. So we were exonerated. We're making it whole on a larger scale than just the onsite.
But we've only damaged a portion of it, so a greater whole.
Yeah, the wetland goes beyond our area of impact. And, talking with the property owner recently, of the 107 acres, their purchase of credits, had more zeros on it, than ours, for sure. To make that developable was a significant, purchase of credits.
Well,
You're right. I mean, 5 years turns into 15 years, pretty easily. I'm involved in a project like that where it's been 12 years now. It was supposed to be 5 and it has cost 3 times as much money as what we had expected. So if you can purchase these credits, do it right now. I'm actually surprised they're even letting you do that, but they're starting to do away with that credit system.
Let's get on the ball.
Yeah, we should do it.
I will entertain a motion at this time.
Move to authorize the city administrator to execute a contract for the purchase of wetland credits for the purpose of fulfilling permit requirements. The east side water line extension estimated at current market rate cost of between $32,000 and $35,000 for a 0.184 acre of required credits.
Is there a second? And Counselor Smith. There's a motion by Counselor Wells and a second by Counselor Smith to authorize the city administrator to execute a contract for the purchase of wetland credits for the purpose of fulfilling permit requirements of the east side water line extension, estimated at the current market rate cost of between $32,000 and $35,000 for the 0.184 acre of required credits. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hands. 5 in favor. Any opposed? 0. So the motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. And
Per acre cost, that's very expensive.
One of the things we're doing. Maybe doing that? Yeah, it is.
and rapidly increasing apparently, so.
And
Yeah. You have any wetland in your property? You can maybe
Oh,
sell.
but wetlands are safe, Trails End is.
Yeah.
And as with any, item like this, it's actually more expensive, the smaller, the chunkier one, and people are wanting to sell them in larger
Big-
chunks, so,
Big chunks.
yeah, so it's.
More zeros. Yeah. All right, we have the administrative information reports. Mr. Hanks will give the staff reports below, or will give the staff reports and call staff for support as needed.
Okay, so we can move from this highly technical infrastructure and credits and financial stuff to kind of right brain, left brain thing and go to a city logo discussion. Brought this one forward to just start the conversation with council. It is in 2 places. It's located in the council goals and work plan for the current year that we're in. And as I now am feeling more comfortable and attuned to what we have going on the infrastructure side and wanting to really make sure I understand leading into the retreat what the current work plan means and how we accomplish it. I wanted to bring this one forward. We've had, staff has had some conversations about it. I've also heard and talked with Coburg Main Street about some of the branding and logo work that they've done, and really just wanted to have some feedback from council about where this sits in terms of prioritization, maybe any context and direction or just individual, even if it's not consensus from council, just some thoughts about the logo. Like I said, staff, we discussed it at a couple of our leadership team meetings. The bullet points are a summary of some of the comments from there. It's not an exhaustive list of comments, and probably a few of them are my own bullets. I can't, label them as just all staff. I've been involved in several kind of city organizational logos and branding processes before. And while it is kind of, it can have a sense that it's not super important, it actually is pretty valuable in terms of our communication abilities, understanding messaging to the community about what is coming, is it coming from the city as an organization,
versus Main Street versus, you know, a chamber in other communities, you know, all the different branding. And then within that, you know, decisions to be made about, is one logo used for everyone? Is, you know, do each department have kind of their own that kind of all is cohesive, but separate? And, you know, what is it supposed to convey? What is it trying to convey? And probably the starter kit is, you know, moving from what are the good elements of kind of the existing logo and branding? And what do we have, in our heads, that we want to, you know, evolve or migrate to? So that's really it for the conversation. It can be brief. You could however much or little you want to discuss and give us feedback. Ultimately, you know, there are a lot of different ways to go. It could be somewhat in-house driven and with a little, no matter what, I think we'll want to have at least a little bit of a graphic designer involvement. That's what I put the budget I put in the staff report is really for internally to us to handle most of any public process we want. If we want to ask committees about elements they think are important for the logo, or if we want to do something on, you know, a little Survey Monkey on, so, you know, online or social media. And then do all of that with staff in-house and really only job out the true graphic design once we've narrowed it down and provide some parameters or scope to someone. I've been involved, like I said, where we've done a full RFP and the graphic designer and people, the branding experts have done everything. They've run the public process. They've done the whole work. That's a whole lot different than the price point I listed. I don't think we need that, but I don't know what I don't know. So, looking for some guidance, and then we'll put together some stuff in the future months based on what you'd like us to do.
Did you want some comment or feedback now?
Yes, anything that would help guide us at how we shape this and rank it, prioritize it, and put it through the paces.
We did talk quite a bit about it at our last council retreat almost a year ago. Yeah, so go ahead.
I do know Nike's logo was only like $75, you know.
Yeah. That's quite that one is, that's a good history there. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they're available. I'm just thinking of what some of the questions might come up from community members, you know, when was this logo developed? How long has it been in effect? Is there some real need to change it? Those are the first couple of comments I would think would come up.
Do you have any feelings about the current logo?
I mean, it looks fine to me. I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, I can understand to have a new one if people felt that there was a better design that communicated something specifically we wanted to communicate. They didn't see this in there. I also heard that I thought we had a couple different logos we've used, and to make a consistent one logo make sense, whether it's one logo that we currently have or whether it's a new one.
My understanding, maybe it gets more input. I don't want to dominate the conversation at all, but there was some question about a separation of logos between what Main Street was doing for tourism promotion, which is kind of always an issue, is, you know, how do you separate, or do you separate? And my opinion is yes, you do. You separate between kind of the tourism promotion and the kind of the Main Street work, and they've done some branding and logo work. And I think my understanding is the city logo was kind of on the tails of that movement as setting the table for kind of that community branding. And then the subset would be how similar or how different the city's logo would be from the communities. And, you know, I would take in looking at it, since I'm staring at it here, you guys don't stare out in there. You know, it doesn't say city of, it just says the city. I actually like that it says Oregon. Many logos don't say the state. I think it actually, that is something I think is valuable. I think conveying the city, I think, you know, potentially modernizing it. And it also gives us a chance, just whatever we land on, whether it's tiny changes or some overhaul, for us internally, is to then kind of sweep the decks and make sure that what we're using is the right logo with the right shape, with the right color palette, with the, you know, in the right places, because a lot of it is for templates. It's consistency of messaging across the board. And part of that is how our documents look and function as well. So that's kind of the auxiliary piece, but the starter kit is, you know, the actual icon or logo.
Counselor Wilson.
Thank you. It is an old logo. It's an old looking logo. It'd be nice to update it, but the updating the logo is just the first step, and it's changing the letterhead and changing the website and changing the signage, and it's quite a process.
Yeah.
What prompted this? Just
Well, it's on the council adopted work plan. So that's why I'm bringing it up. It was prompted by, and I want to make sure I understand kind of the context and direction that the reason for it being there kind of in two spots. And one of the spots, it does lend itself to that conversation of the community and visitor branding of Coburg. And then the second one is a little more focused on the brand as the organization.
We also have it on vehicles too, don't we?
Yeah, so once we get to that spot, the whole kind of phasing of how you would do it, you know, all the electronic stuff is fairly easy. Website, you know, and all of our letterhead stuff, we don't really do a whole lot of too much pre-printed materials. And if we do, we just use those up and replace, you know, it's not thrown in the trash. But there are some elements that have higher price points to convert them, and that would be a budgeted thing, you know, over time.
We won't throw the new police car out.
No, we,
Counselor Smith.
I think, I'm fine either way. I do think when I talked with Megan at Main Streets about this, one of the issues that we're finding that brought the logo conversation up is so often, Main Streets and then, I remember Leah and
Community
Foundation.
yeah, so often if we're gonna do a logo, I think it's really important that the city logo is very obviously city, and that the other organizations are obviously very different in community, because people get the idea that because Main Streets is hosting something, the city is paying for it. That the city is still controlling or paying for it. And so part of the logo discussion was not to ever have a Main Streets function where it says anything about the city of Coburg, because that perception is hard to delineate, because people don't necessarily talk about it. There's an edge to the fact that, oh, why is the city spending money doing this and this and this? And if the part of the reason that Main Streets wanted to do a logo was to differentiate. This is a separate community organization, not the city. We were trying to make sure that we even talked about not having the word Coburg in it at all, just Main Streets.
And I think that's important. That's one, you know, when you talk about Nike, you talk about any of these brands. I mean, that's what a logo does, right? Is that quick, identifiable differentiation between things. And I think that's an important piece. And again, then the question is, you know, how useful and identifiable is this particular logo to do that first level differentiation? And then there's also, you know, there's stuff internal about, you know, what it does, how it's used when we are working with other cities, we're working with counties. Our logo goes on things, you know, working with Lane County Economic Development on a joint promotional thing in a Business Oregon publication where our logo goes on it. What does that convey when the city's logo is placed there? What do we want it to convey? And usually that's part of a discussion with a graphic designer, is kind of that, you know, different scripts and different fonts convey different things, and whimsical versus businessy, and, you know, all those kind of things that work themselves into these conversations. And we can probably come up with, you know, a whole lot of just tweaks, which is what I did at the very last place I was. I without a whole lot of fanfare, we did a kind of a cleanup of the logo and a modernization of the logo, not really changing the core elements of it much at all. Turned out, I thought, really well, and the community really liked it. When I did prior, quite a long time ago was much more involved, and it was going from a very old, like, seal, kind of the 20s and 30s, like that actually probably had a thing that did a seal at one time, and moved away from that kind of a seal logo to kind of a more modern utilization of a branded logo that was current and better used for electronic. So I was assuming that the conversation would lead to a little more of a mostly DIY, some community involvement, and maybe some smaller modifications to this, rather than starting with and going whole hog with a grandiose overhaul. But maybe that's the kind of initial direction I was looking for, is how we dial that, and then we can come back pretty easily and show what we think is a smart way to help us get there.
We've been having conversations about this for a number of years. Many of you will remember, I think it was first brought up in the 2016 visioning project. And then we brought it back in 2020 with the Economic Development Committee. And they were tasked with developing a logo and brand guidelines to be used for community events and marketing. So there has been some work done. And of course, we've incorporated, and those designs, it still said Coburg, Oregon, and it incorporated the penny farthing by, but my question is one of fiscal responsibility. And as we look at so many pressing projects, I have to be honest and tell you, I'm not sure which way to go on this. So
Happy with the current one.
I'm not unhappy with the current one. I mean, it's simplistic. It says Coburg, Oregon. It identifies who we are.
It would be nice if it's a city somewhere in that. Just
Okay.
add the word city.
City of Coburg.
But the logo itself is.
The established date, is often on
Yes.
logos, and I think it's
True.
especially appropriate in Coburg with having such a.
If you look at our entry sign out on the east, that has the established date on it.
Just have one more comment, and I'll
Yes.
defer to you. You had a hand
Oh,
up.
Well, I was just
Councilman
gonna kind of say what Counselor Smith kind of touched on it, but I think it would be nice. I agree with everybody that's talked, I don't necessarily think this rises to the level of we need to do this, given that we have so many other priorities that are a bit more pressing. But I think we could do something simple that maybe wouldn't cost a lot of money and would hopefully take a ton of time and improve it a little bit, like adding city of Coburg, Oregon, and maybe the established. That would be kind of what I would recommend. But I also, one other comment is, I don't know what the other logos look like for some of these other organizations. And it might be helpful to also look at those and make sure that this one, to be able to tell, that this one is different enough from the others.
Main Street logo is kind of it's a little more complicated and a little more busy. Originally, it was like two lampposts with Main Street or something on a banner between them. I can't remember now for sure. We haven't used it a whole lot.
Yeah.
so I don't
We
know.
can definitely put together kind of that comparison, and I did have a conversation, but knowing I was putting this in the packet with Megan at Main Street, had a good back and forth with her about this. This is something that this is her world professionally, within Coburg Main Street and outside of that. So, I got some valuable feedback from her as well.
So the last comment I have is, I agree with you. It looks a little bit old or dated, but maybe we like that because we celebrate we celebrate historic Coburg. And rather than maybe city of, if you did have historic Coburg and then in small print established what year it was, people would recognize it's a city, and you have a little bit more character describing it as historic Coburg rather than the city of Coburg. And then if you did that, you could almost get one of those dino things and just paste it on there. Just put historic and established, and Or even multiple votes.
We could take 2 zeros off that 1,500 and we're done. Yeah. 3 zeros, maybe. Yeah.
Very good. I like the way you think.
So can I maybe try a quick summarizing?
Yes, thank
But-
you.
So what I think I'm hearing is worth a little bit of poking around at the internal staff level, worth coordinating some stuff with Main Street a little bit early, having those discussions and maybe bringing something back. Maybe it's just at the retreat, as kind of a narrowing in and getting a feel for something without going out to do any contract work with a graphic designer yet, or unless it's $100 to dress up, but very super minimal, under 500 kind of thing, and bring back a couple of alternatives that have the flavor of what's being talked about. Is that leaning on that end of the spectrum to start with?
I think knowing what Main Streets looks like, knowing what the foundation has, I think those comparisons could be really helpful and we could update it a little, but not go hog wild.
Good. We'll shoot for a little. We won't want to take up the retreat too much time for that, but we'll shoot for a little. Maybe that's a good point that we add some mellow conversations in an otherwise hopefully busy day of retreat content. So good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate all of the thought and the comments that went into that too. You want to go over the Pioneer Valley
Yeah, which
Estates
one's number
summary?
2 on there? Yeah, so in the red folder item, I put together a summary, kind of an informational memo. It's just a one pager, and then on the second page is the letter that went out to announce the open house that I think I've shared in prior administration reports, just for context. As the mayor said, excellent turnout. We weren't at all sure exactly. We didn't hear back from anyone. We didn't ask to hear back. So, but really exceptional turnout. Councilor Lehman and Councilor Ingebrigtsen were there as well, which I think was really valuable with the mayor, Brian and I. And aside from maybe one or two outliers, I think everyone understood the intent of the meeting, which was to start a dialogue and really hear what they had to say, and honestly expected to hear a little venting and frustration, and we did receive that, which is great. That's okay. So I put together kind of a
Civil.
yeah,
It was civil
absolutely.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of room for a different understanding of the history, because it's a long one. It's a long history, and it's got a lot of frustration points where different forks were taken, and there's difference of opinions about why those forks were chosen. So, the part that I was trying to get across was there's elements of the history of it that are very important and worthwhile to continue in the conversation. And there are probably elements of the history of it that probably are okay to fall by the wayside, that aren't necessarily, they're not irrelevant to the evolution of how we got where we are, but they may not be very relevant to the solutions moving forward. And so that's what we're, after in kind of that dialogue, was to maybe set the table and as the mayor mentioned in the opening of the meeting, reestablish communication, there was, the words trust was brought up. I think they've felt. Yeah, a few times. Yeah. And the backing to those comments, made some sense. I mean, it's, and it's really none of us at the table, that were involved in some of the early stuff, obviously. But in summary, I think it was a success to start that up. We also got a lot of email addresses, so now we have a better pathway for communication that I think will be beneficial, and really probably the most tangible takeaway. It wasn't everybody's primary objective, but I think it works the best for us, is the fact that the project that needs to be done at some point, the distribution system infrastructure replacement, is not in our capital improvements plan at all. It's a known deficiency of our system, and it is part of our system, whether it's inside the city limits or out. It is part of our system, so we should be evaluating it and including it somewhere in our CIP and the capital improvements plan. So that's kind of a takeaway I took, was we will include that. Now, that doesn't mean that we will have a solution on the funding side of the inclusion. The project and the estimated expense should be in there, and then we will discuss, we'll probably from a staff standpoint, recommend what year it slots in the CIP. And then we'll have to talk about funding sources. And there really is also then a conversation about, the philosophy here. It's a policy call on the philosophy of how those customers that are a part of our water system but aren't in the city limits, how relevant is the fact that they're not in the city limits to the conversation of them as a water customer. So that's priming the pump a little bit for future conversation, but I think that's really a pretty integral part of the conversation at the council level is really the philosophy of how they're considered in the water system, and therefore then that rolls downhill to the rate structures and then the prioritization, of their component of the infrastructure system. So I don't know, anyone else that was there, it'd be great to add context. Again, I thought it was great to have the contingent we had.
And we'll have to work with the county too in terms of timing when we
Yeah.
get to that, because the county is planning on replacing or resurfacing the roads in that development, and they cannot really do that without crushing the pipes, the distribution pipes to the homes. And that's Brian called halt on that when he was talking to the county, and so thank you for that. So we'll really have to coordinate how this gets done.
Nor do we want to have them do that and then us come in later and cut it up.
We don't want to be the city that comes in and rips up the new streets to put in, we all hear those jokes, right? Don't want to do that. Councilor Lehman.
I just want to commend you on your handling of the meeting, and also Brian and you. It was a 2-hour meeting that you kept the lid on it. It was at times volatile and pointed and angry and frustrated, and you guys did a great job.
Try not to take it personal. I did have to look for some arrows and backs when we left.
Socialism.
Yeah, Brian got a chuckle out of that. But, there was a lot of emotion and passion, and perhaps some misunderstanding on all sides. So, misunderstanding of what the meeting was really about, though most of the participants there, in all honesty, did understand what that meeting was about. There were just a couple that perhaps in a different agenda.
Yeah, and those that you're describing, I think, the good side of that part is eventually we will be at the spot that several people were already wanting information about. That the intention is to address as much of the kind of more detailed rate and financial issues associated with the situation as possible. It just wasn't, we weren't putting all that together for this open house initially.
And we did afterwards brainstorm a couple ideas that maybe we'll talk at retreat on.
Yeah.
Unless you wanted to talk earlier.
No, I think that kind of goes with the philosophy conversation, and I think we can maybe kind of flesh it out a little bit and have a little bit more discussion about it. But there are, I think there's some opportunities that there's multiple ways to go that have pros and cons, and that's really, I think, our exercise is to try and at least put a skeleton of that together for a conversation in a work session type environment, so we can kind of look at the scope of options and see, what our best path forward is and what steps to take. There may be some interim steps, as we discussed, that might help move us there, that don't overcommit us to anything, but help narrow it down and get us somewhere. So
There's work to be done.
Yep.
But I'm pleased that we're addressing it. Really am happy that we're looking at that and figuring, we will figure out a plan for it.
So when is our next work session?
Tomorrow. No. No, in January.
yes, I believe the fourth Tuesday in January.
What day in January, have we set it yet?
Fourth Tuesday.
Fourth Tuesday?
Those are always reserved for work sessions, that fourth
23rd.
Tuesday.
Again, at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, that's the one that, it would be the slot if we have like an emergency item. I don't have a topic set up for it because we're also prepping, as Sammy reminded, for the retreat, which is the
Early February.
next weekish, so.
First, second Saturday in February. Yeah. I don't have my calendar.
Do we have a meeting on the 23rd?
No.
We don't have a topic scheduled for that tentative slot. As the mayor said, I've kind of,
Always held there.
Yeah.
But we only fill them if we have something that needs to be done.
So the actual work session is not that date, but do we have a date for it?
We do not yet for 24, I believe.
we do not have one formally scheduled. I think the one that's formally scheduled is the February meeting, which is a work session about the CIP. We'll get out the full calendar when the full year calendar soon.
The 3rd of February. Well, of course, it's on my anniversary. It's always right in, there have been several times it's been on my anniversary.
You're gonna invite Jim?
Yeah, we'll bring him. He can have cookies. It'll be great. You get married for so long, you know, it gets, whatever. Yeah, it's another year.
So the next item is the document that Sammy referenced earlier and the mayor already talked about at the opening, which is the process for the council vacancy. So that I don't know if there's any additional conversation needed there. That just, it lays out the charter language. And then the second page just has the notice that is already out that helps people understand the elements of of what we're recruiting for. And hopefully, as the mayor said, it'd be great to see if we could get as many interested parties as we got for the transportation ad hoc. Maybe a tall order, but that's.
It is just a partial term, so you can remind people, it really is just a 12-month commitment. Council Fox, how will it be posted?
The same way as all of our public notices. So it goes on our social media, our websites, in the utility bills, posted at Dairy Mart, posted at our front door.
And word of mouth.
We do have an email that goes out to an interested parties list, and I think it hits about 95 different emails announcing it to share.
Effective tool, yeah. I think the last one on the list, is it? Yes, the last one on the list is the city administration report. I'll quickly go through it. If there's any other questions, you can ask me and we'll grab the others at the back table if needed. The first one,
I'm
go
so
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah.
Did we need to vote on this, declaring the council vacancy? That's not.
Did that.
We did declare it.
We
We
did?
did that early on. Yeah,
Oh,
sort of
okay, I didn't realize.
wrapping back around. I apologize. I was not clear on that.
Yep, did it early in the meeting. Yep. Sorry. LTD, Lane Transit District, Mayor Bell initiated a meeting, that was really, I think, similar to the PVE open house. It was a get to know each other relationship kind of, orientation meeting, that I thought went really well. The relatively new, executive director, I think that's his title, maybe CEO. I can't remember the actual title, but the chief administrative officer, for LTD, who was relatively new, came from the Kansas City area, and the board member, the elected board member that is for our region, our portion of LTD's boundaries, came and met with us and just talked about what they're working on, what they're doing. They have some upcoming strategic planning work. They have some community involvement aspects of that strategic planning. So we, raised our hand and said, we will help, get COBRA representation on those groups. We'll help spread the word and get that out. They've offered up some other stuff for our staff to kind of make sure we understand what is currently available, or being done, on the microtransit, side of things, as well as their main system and data on ridership. I think 20 to 22 people, I think he said, are on the two buses that, you know, the hard part is kind of having a relative number to gauge whether or not that's increasing, steady, decreasing, you know, all of that. But a great start, I think, to more, closer, involvement in what they've got going on, and we'll keep council apprised, when they have those, different openings for either elected officials, community members, staff, to be a part of those engagement processes that they're working on, coming up. Buildable lands inventory, that's this is the bummer alert. We did not get, the, DLCD grant, that we had hoped for. The letter, is in the packet here. Typically, you know, those are, I think we got kudos for the quality of the application. There were, many more times, the application dollars requested than there were funds to, grant. And there was, one or two priority projects that beat us out. I think that probably had more of a regional scope to them, is where I took from that. But we will, the good part of that is we have a really good application already in the bag, ready to go whenever we see other opportunities for the buildable lands. And we'll still keep looking at other means to accomplish that as well. That a grant for a full, consultant package isn't the only way a buildable lands inventory can be done. So that's still on the burner. And I think, Megan is talking with the planning commission about that for, 2024 goals for the commission, and where that, where they feel that sits. So bummer, but, that's the way grant hunting goes. The flashing crosswalk beacons, as you probably have seen if you walked on Willamette up there, at least the pedestal, the short pedestal that is the button pusher, that part is up. The rest of the sign and the flashing, beacons will come up relatively soon. We're working with, Lane County. They're doing the installation. We did the purchase. That's been some ongoing conversation to kind of land on who does what, when, how, and who pays for what, and all of that. But we're working through all of that. So I don't have a firm date, but relatively soon, we'll have that project completed. We'll have those working, their solar powered, flashing beacons at that crossing. I'm hopeful that that's a real life example. Not only is it useful for there, but it's also a great example to use for, the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee, and where else does something like that have, the best utilization. Staff will present some ideas, but, the ad hoc may have some other, ideas as well. So, kudos to Brian on keeping that one going. That one, I think, again, was one that was, started before I got here.
Years,
Yeah, it's been in the works for quite a while, and, just persistence in seeing it through. And we're close to the finish line. Next one, Brian and I think both talked about, a little bit in the work session, last meeting with council, is the public works staffing structure changes. Just going to a different staffing model that I think is going to be, for a 12-month pilot period, and really making sure that kind of a model doesn't have any flaws, or shortcomings that we hadn't thought of. And if it does, it'll give us an opportunity to figure out what are the best ways to, address them. Instead of having an all hands on deck for all categories, it provides a little more clarity of assignment across the major functions. And with the same leadership from Brian and Burke as the supervisor, but deploying them somewhat differently. And then you'll see, we'll have a conversation in the budget time also about, how that different deployment alters a little bit the cost allocation, model for how we assign those costs to the various funds. But the main impetus isn't the budgeting component. It's really, I think, enhancing our already strong staff, public works staff, operations, and really identifying, how we can keep maintaining or enhancing service levels with the existing staff levels. And I think this is a great project that Brian's putting forward. So I just wanted to make sure that you're all aware of some of the details of that. Then the last one is the good news, a grant that we did get. These are not, these are easier to get, I'll have to say. The small city allotment through ODOT is a little more predictable grant product. And we were awarded the full maximum amount of 250,000. So we've just submitted the follow-up documents for that, and that is a significant funding component for the North Willamette Harrison Macy project. That's probably a little over hopefully depending on the bids, a little over a third of the total will come from that grant.
So that's the sidewalks and looking at that.
Right, more on the Willamette component of it is the grant, but in aggregate funds about a third of the overall, but it does have it is project specific, but it will blend with the overall project. Yep. And then we have some of the data from and bullet points from the various departments, and we are working on looking at changing some of these up and providing them more in graph and chart trend. It's either with or instead of kind of the bullet list stat. Some don't lend themselves very much to charts and graphs, but some do, and we're working on a template for that in the future months. I think that's the finish of the administration stuff.
Any questions from counselor? Clarification needed from staff? Oh, yes?
I would just say kudos to Brian for being the band about it.
Yep.
Yeah, because in the first crosswalk where it was
Oh, yeah, we threatened to go out there with cans of yellow paint and just paint crosswalks on there. I mean, that was painful. Wow. Yeah, this has been a process, but, I think we're getting close, and I think that'll make that crossing much safer and will please a lot of our citizens. It's important.
We are using that project, to work on that relationship with the county to make, to try and make more of that smoother and see what they need from us to make it smoother and what we need from them, and having some conversations with their department leadership to try and make sure that we're not either inadvertently grinding on each other or how do we best navigate it as partners. I think we're making progress there too.
Mr. Harmon?
I just wanted to add one more thing to that. I was told by Lane County that it would be done before Christmas.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
and it looks like they could probably have it done before this weekend, but before Christmas.
So it'll be our Christmas present. Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you. And I will add, thank you, Brian, for redoing schedules, listening to your staff. I think that will increase staff satisfaction, hopefully increase staff retention, because public works staff is not easy to come by. Qualifications are increasing all the time, and competition is stiff. So we want to keep our really good people, as we do throughout the city. We're very fortunate in the city to have a lot of long-term employees.
One more comment about Public Works after our last weekend is it's really nice to know that you can present an idea or ask if something can be done. And you always get a positive, if you can't do it, it's like, we'll look at it, we'll see, we'll try. It's never do you feel like, it's like, don't even ask me, I'm not doing it. I mean, it's a nice partnership
hard
between
no.
community and Public Works, because everybody knows they're really stressed and have a lot to do, but all of the employees are very cordial and very respectful and really do, I think, probably some of their own personal time to help make this community a better spot. They really do work hard.
Counselor Lehman.
Are we in council comments right now? I don't know if we.
We certainly can be. That sounds like a plan.
Okay, I just had one. Will we have a letter of appreciation for Kyle Blaine for his service? And number two, can we extend an invitation for him and his family to come to the staff holiday party?
What's the feeling of council?
You know, that when I went the first time, I got a little plaque and it's very nice on it.
It's on.
Could ask Kyle to come for the next city council meeting and present him with the plaque and thank him for his service. I think it was 5 years.
That party as well. Yep. I want to follow and extend an invitation to him.
Can do.
I like the idea of the plaque, yeah. Thank you.
Anything else? Oh, Counselor Fox.
I had absolutely nothing to do with the Christmas, event, and I've been going to them for about 20 years, and I'd have to say that I felt this way, but my wife said it was the best one ever, and a number of, fellow citizens said the same thing, so to hear that cascading around.
Was it because you had nothing to do with it?
No, I've had nothing to do with anything, except for, celebrate on the side and pick up
We know
candy
where
for my
you've been
kids.
for next year.
I would add, from the public works side, and I appreciate all those comments because they are awesome. We've had a great relationship with Megan at Main Street, and I think that has fostered what Counselor Smith said, has made it easier to do. Because she's always looking at, well, if we can't do that, here's alternative A, B, or C. It makes it a lot easier to navigate when it's the same way that you described for our side happens on the Main Street side. So I think it shows.
Yeah, it was well attended. And I think I've heard the same thing that you have heard, that it was probably the best yet. So upcoming agenda items, State of the City will be January 9th. That'll be just preceding a city council meeting. The Heritage Committee is meeting on December 13th. As far as I know, that's still in place. Planning Commission will be meeting on December 20th. City Hall will be closed on December 25th. And also on January 1st. So those are definitely hard dates. And then February 3rd for the council retreat, and that is an all-day event here in City Hall. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:57.